You make no friends in the pits and you take no prisoners. 1 minute you're up $500,000 in soybeans and the next, boom, your kids don't go to college and they've repossessed your Bentley. Are you with me?
The revolution starts now.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Turn those machines back on!
You are about to enter the Peter Schiff Show.
Show me the money!
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
The Peter Schiff Show is on.
I don't know when they decided that they wanted to make a virtue out of selfishness.
Your money, your stories, your freedom. The Peter Schiff Show.
Well, while Americans were enjoying a 3-day holiday weekend, courtesy of Martin Luther King, the rest of the world was reacting to some of the news that came out over the weekend. And our markets finally got a chance to react today. It was a big day in the U.S. markets. Pretty much everything related to the United States was down. It was really a sell America day. And I think this really is going to set the tone for the rest of the year. The Dow Jones dropped over 800 points today. Let me see the exact decline. 870 points, about 1.75%. And both the NASDAQ and the S&P 500 were down a little over 2%. But it wasn't just U.S. stocks that were down. Bonds really got clobbered. In fact, the yield on a 10-year Treasury is now up to 4.3%. It had gotten down to about 4% around the time of the last quarter-point Fed rate cut. But we are now headed higher. I think we're going to be back at 4.5% in short order. And in fact, the 30-year yield is now back above 4.9. I think we could be above 5% by next week. The dollar index also tanking today across the board, down almost a full percent, down 0.8 to 98.58. So dollar down, U.S. Treasuries, U.S. bonds down, U.S. stocks down. Gold and silver, on the other hand, were way up. Gold was up about $160 since Friday. We closed almost at 47.60. 47.58 is the last I'm looking at it. We closed on Friday at just about 4,600 even. Maybe it was slightly below. I think it was just below 4,600. Maybe 45.95, something like that. So $160, a 3.5% move up in gold. Silver did even better, was up 4.5%. We closed above 94, about 94.40 and change. And we traded, I think, above 95.5 intraday. So that's the new record high. I mean, we were actually closer to 100 than we were to 90 in silver. So big move up in gold and silver. And in fact, foreign stock markets, in terms of U.S. dollars, did pretty good. I mean, some of the European names were down, but a lot of the emerging market stocks in Southeast Asia and South America were very strong, had positive days. So it was a good day if you were invested in overseas stocks, if you own precious metals, if you own mining stocks, emerging markets. It was a horrible day if you owned U.S. stocks. And, of course, if you owned Bitcoin, which also tanked even more than the stock market. Bitcoin is now back below 90,000, not 90, although it will be back below 90 eventually, but right now it's below 90,000, trading around 89,600 and change. It was about 95,000 last week. In fact, Michael Saylor announced on his X page this morning that Strategy spent another couple of billion, more than $2 billion, buying more Bitcoin. He's already down over 100 million on it because his average price was over 95,000. Somehow he managed to buy the high. Now, I don't think that's a coincidence that he bought the high. I think his buying is what made the high. He came into the market and bought a bunch of Bitcoin to prop up the price. I mean, that's mainly why he's buying. He's not trying to get a good price. He's trying to manipulate the price. But he only manipulated it enough to fill him on his order. And then once he stopped buying, the market tanked. So Bitcoin also, again, if you own cryptocurrencies, if you own Bitcoin, it was a tough day, but it's going to be an even tougher week. It's going to be a tough month, and it's going to be a very painful year if you don't get out of these markets. And even though gold and silver have already moved up a lot, they're not going to stop rising, as I've been saying. In fact, if you go look at my podcast from last week and, again, the Schiff Gold Friday market wrap that I did on Friday, what did I say? Once again, buy on Friday, buy on Saturday. Don't wait till Sunday night to buy gold. Don't wait till Tuesday when the U.S. markets reopen, because look what you're looking at. Look at how much more expensive gold and silver is now than it was on Friday. Now, the gold and silver mining stocks had good days. Could have been better, but good days. The GDX was up 5.7%, and the GDXJ was up 6.2%. Now, I mentioned on Friday, on the Schiff Gold Friday market wrap, that I thought that the action in the mining stocks was very constructive to a rally this week, because even though gold and silver finished down on the day, gold was down about 20, 30 bucks, silver was down a couple of bucks, the gold stocks all rallied and the silver stocks rallied. So that, to me, it looked like investors were starting to realize that it doesn't matter if gold and silver go down. These stocks are so cheap, even if they go way down, which they're not going to do. And some of the stocks had really good days today. Just as an example, my best performing gold stock was IAMGOLD. That one was up 15.5% today. Of course, it's at a 52-week high. We actually own that. It's one of our top 5 holdings. Not just do we own it in the gold fund, it's one of my top 5 holdings in the Euro-Pacific International Value Fund, which, by the way, will be probably the number 1 fund in its category year to date out of over 300 funds, in part because we do have some gold stocks as part of the portfolio, one of them being IAMGOLD. So that one was up 15.5%. My best performing stock on the day that I own myself is a small silver company, which actually we own in the gold fund too. But Silver Crown Royalties was up 40% in one day, right? So this gives you an idea of what can happen. And by the way, 52-week low on this stock, 381. Where is it now? 1275 is where it closed. Today's high is 1360. So this gives you an idea of the size of the moves that have been made. But despite the fact that gold and silver stocks have moved up so much, I believe they're cheaper now than they were a year ago before the big move. That's because of the huge increase in the price of gold and silver. Now, I expected this big increase, although to be honest, I didn't expect it to happen this rapidly. But it's even surprised me a bit, the speed that the market is rallying. Not that we're at these prices. I actually expected us to be at these prices a long time ago. We're finally catching up to where I knew we were going to be. But clearly, we're moving a lot faster. This is going to continue. So it's a whole new ballgame for these mining stocks. So they are still ridiculously cheap. I think there is tremendous upside potential in these stocks from here. And I think at the end of the year, people who did not buy gold and silver stocks here are going to be kicking themselves. And if you own them and you sold some because you thought, oh, look, I tripled my money, let me get out, people are going to regret those sales. Normally, you don't regret taking a profit. But in this case, I think people will, because they'll be leaving so much more on the table. So my advice, again, is get into these gold and silver mining stocks. You don't even have to wait for a pullback. I mean, there are a lot of pullbacks, so if you want to be cute. But you know what? Doesn't even matter. And if you're buying my fund, you can only buy at the close. So, it makes it simple, right? You only get filled. My gold fund is Euro Pacific Gold Fund, EPGIX. We got a lot of small stocks like this Silver Crown, right? We got a lot of these little ones that have the potential to go up 40% in one day, right? You don't have that much potential in the big stocks, although when you get IM Gold going up 15%, that is a big move in one day. But a lot of my stocks were up 5, 6, 7% today. So that was only maybe double normal. But there are a lot more days coming like this. And I know a lot of people, I've been posting on X a lot, telling people, hey, go buy gold, buy silver. And people keep saying, why are you telling people to buy the top? And that's because it won't be the top for long. Remember, I forget, I said it first earlier last year, but I said the longer you wait to buy the higher the high you're going to buy. And that's it. Yes, I'm telling people to buy the top because today's top won't be the top for long. There's not going to be big pullbacks. Yeah, there'll be some, but they're not going to be big enough to wait for. And you never know exactly when they're going to happen because there's so much money waiting to come in to gold and silver. That's what the precious metals mining stock investors still haven't come to terms with. How much higher gold and silver prices are going. They're still worried that we're going to have a big drop. That's why they're reluctant to bid up these prices because they don't believe they're sustainable. The only thing that's not sustainable is how low they are. They are going to keep going up. And the reason that this is going to happen, again, by the way, the symbol on my gold fund is EPGIX, or go to Europac.com and look at, we have separately managed accounts as well in gold stocks. But the reason that this is going to happen was highlighted this weekend with Donald Trump's rhetoric, right? That it is basically giving the world a strong reason to do what they should have done decades ago and what I have been expecting them to do. Little did I know that the catalyst would be Greenland. I mean, who the hell knew that, right? That would be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Would be what causes ultimately the mass exodus out of the U.S. dollar and what causes the U.S. dollar to lose its reserve currency status would be Greenland. And I said something about that on my last podcast. I could not believe what the president was saying. And of course, he's getting all this support, from Republicans who are afraid to stand up because what he's saying is idiotic. Yet all of his cabinet members, all of the Republican pundits on television, the rest of the Senate Republicans, they're all standing behind the absurdity of what the president is saying about Greenland. And what caused the big sell-off on Sunday night and then Monday here and Tuesday was Donald Trump basically reiterating that, look, we're going into Greenland whether the Greenlanders want it or not. We can either do it my way or the highway, the easy way or the hard way. We're bringing the troops in and taking it over. We need Greenland. We got to have Greenland, right? We need it for national security. We need it for whatever, the resources, the oil and gas, the strategic minerals. We need it, and we're going to take it. And I pointed this out, that Trump said, look, we got the hottest economy in the world, and we have the strongest military in the world. Now, he's wrong about the hottest economy, but he is correct that we have the strongest military. And what he said is that we're going to use that might to do whatever we think is right. That, nothing can stop us but my own mind, right? I have unlimited power. I've got carte blanche to use America's military to do whatever I want. And I said this is a very dangerous message to send because I said that one of the reasons the world was willing to give America the exorbitant privilege of the reserve currency, one of the reasons the world was willing to support our economy and allow us to have this big military was because we would use that military to defend the world from aggression, not institute aggression, that the U.S. military would be a force for good. Now Trump is saying it's a force for America's good. And the rest of you, well, you're just going to do what we want. If you have something that we need, we're going to take it, because what are you going to do about it, right? Nobody can stop us. And in fact, he wrote a letter to the Prime Minister of Norway, and he basically said that one of the reasons that he's no longer a man of peace is because he didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize, right? He was all pissed off that he didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize, which, first of all, isn't issued by the Norwegian government. It's, it was endowed by, it's a private, award. It's not given by the government, but Trump believes the government has a lot of power. But apparently he's thinking about going into Greenland out of spite, right? Reminded me of the Seinfeld episode. But I can't even believe nobody proofreads the stuff that the president writes. I mean, obviously nobody proofreads the nonsense he puts out on Truth Social. I mean, so he basically writes this letter, and admits that he's got a grudge against Europe because he didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize. And so now, screw peace, right? I'm for war, right? Although he's had to kind of walk that back, but he really couldn't, because he wrote it, right? It's it's hard to walk it back when you own it. But of course, Denmark, that's a totally separate country from Norway. I mean, I'm getting back at Norway by invading Denmark or taking Denmark, Greenland. What does Greenland got to do with Norway, right? But the whole absurdity of this, the idea that we even need Greenland, is almost as ridiculous as invading it to get what we want. But the fact that he is putting that out there is extremely dangerous, and it is going to blow back in a big, big way. And I think that it's going to be impossible to put these worms back in the can, right? He's let them out, and even if he tries to backtrack, even if he tries damage control, it's too late, right? It's out of the box, and the world has made a decision, and they're going to implement that decision. I'm going to talk about this. We got a quick commercial break, so stick around. It's about to get real. Every business is trying to figure out the same thing right now. How do we make AI actually work for us? The possibilities are endless, but guessing is expensive, and waiting around is even worse, because you can bet your competitors aren't sitting still. They're already moving. That's why I recommend NetSuite by Oracle. It's not just another software tool. It's the #1 AI cloud ERP, trusted by over 43,000 businesses. NetSuite brings your financials, inventory, commerce, HR, and CRM into a single system, a single source of truth. And once all your data is connected, AI actually gets smarter, not just predictive, but actionable. It can automate routine tasks, deliver insights that matter, and help you make fast, AI-powered decisions with confidence. You also get total flexibility to use the AI tools you want, thanks to the NetSuite AI connector, which lets you plug your business data directly into the AI of your choice and ask it anything from who are my top customers to where's my inventory bottleneck. This isn't just another AI bolt-on. This is AI built into the core of your operations. Whether your business does millions or hundreds of millions in revenue, NetSuite helps you cut through the noise, cut costs, and stay ahead. If I were building or scaling a business, this is exactly the kind of system I'd be using. Right now, get NetSuite's free business guide, Demystifying AI, at netsuite.com/gold. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/gold. That's netsuite.com/. All right, so I am talking about the blowback from Donald Trump's warmongering over invading, taking over, annexing by force Greenland. Now, I mean, first of all, before I even get into, what's going on, the idea that we need Greenland is ridiculous. I mean, that we need to own it, right? If you buy what Donald Trump is saying, that we need to have a military presence in Greenland as part of our, defense system, our dome. We need it because we want to have a base that's, closer to China, closer to Russia, whatever. We can have a base in Greenland. In fact, I think we used to have one. We just don't have one anymore. But America has military bases in like 50 different countries. We don't own those countries. We just rent some space there. We have bases there. I'm sure the Greenlandians would be happy to rent us a bunch of their Arctic tundra, to have a military base. They're probably fine with it. They'd probably welcome it, right? Because the soldiers would be there and they'd be spending money. They'd be good for the local economy. I'm sure they'd be happy to have a bunch of U.S. soldiers at a base in Greenland. And I'm sure, if we say, hey, we'll protect you in case somebody decides they want to invade you, right? So this is all ridiculous. We don't need to own Greenland. We don't need to make Greenland part of the United States in order to have a military presence in Greenland, right? Trump said something like, well, you don't defend leases. What do you mean you don't defend leases? We got leases all over the place. And you're telling me, like, if I'm renting an apartment and a burglar, breaks into my apartment, I'm going to say, well, I'm just a renter here, so have at it. Do whatever you want. I'm not going to defend this property because I don't own it. I just rent it. It's your home. You live there. If we have a base in Greenland and it's attacked, we're not just going to give it up because it's such nonsense. Nobody challenges Donald Trump, no matter how ridiculous the point that he makes. And he makes so many ridiculous points. First of all, he doesn't know anything about economics. He's complete ignoramus. He may have been a successful businessman, but you don't have to know economics to make money in real estate. You know real estate. And, he was a promotional guy. What does The Apprentice have to do with understanding economics? Look, almost everything he says is just made up bullshit, right? In his big speech that he gave today, I was watching, to commemorate his first year as president. And he keeps talking about, the Gulf of America and how great he was that he renamed it. And he joked that, he was thinking about naming it the Gulf of Trump. But, that he said that was a joke after he mentioned it a few times. But he said the reason he always wanted to name it, or the reason he didn't understand why the Gulf of Mexico was called the Gulf of Mexico, because he said that Mexico only occupied about 8% of the coastline of the Gulf of Mexico, and the other 92% was America. And so it never made any sense to him. Why would it be called the Gulf of Mexico when it's only 8% Mexico and 92% America, right? He's always been wondering that. Except the problem is it's not 8% Mexico. It's about 50-50. I'm not exactly sure if it may even be a little bit more Mexico. And it's not even 50-50 because Cuba has got a chunk of the coast too. I'd be 5% or something. So I don't think either America or Mexico may have 50%, but it's about the same. Just look at a map. You don't even have to measure it. If you look at a map of North America, you see how much of the Gulf of America is consumed by Mexico. It's not even close to 8%. But he mentioned that 8% figure multiple times, right, during his speech. But it's completely wrong, right? And so if Donald Trump is wrong about something, that's simple, right? You could easily just look at a map and say, Mr. President, it's not quite 8%. It's more like 50%, right? So why were you wondering why it's called the Gulf of Mexico all those years? Like, I don't think he actually ever wondered that. It's all a bunch of bullshit, right? But if he's going to get that wrong, why would we expect him to be right on anything else, right? And he's not. He just says whatever the hell comes to his head, and it's more likely to be wrong than true. But he's got such a stranglehold on the Republican Party that nobody will call this guy out. They're all going to go down with the ship because they're afraid because he has such popularity with the voters, right? With the MAGA voters. They're going to destroy this entire Republican Party. It's finished. And it's not Trump's fault. He's just one guy. It's the fault of all the other Republicans that just are enabling this nonsense. And, and again, they so want everything to be good because there's a Republican president that they, repeat the bullshit that it is great, right? And everything is fantastic when it isn't. But let me get back to, again, on Greenland. So some people are saying, well, they've got all these natural resources. They got oil and gas there, and they've got these rare earth minerals. Maybe, maybe they're there. I mean, they probably are there. But if they're there, why aren't they being, extracted right now? Why aren't there a bunch of oil rigs in Greenland, right? Why aren't they mining all these minerals? Because the Greenlandians, how do you ever pronounce them? Greenlanders? But they're not idiots. You got to question why they live up there in Greenland. It's a tough place to live, right? It's a very harsh environment. Maybe beautiful to look at. I'd rather look at it from a distance than live there. Now, I've never been there, so I don't want to necessarily knock it. I'd prefer a tropical island to the Arctic tundra. I have a hard enough time with New England winters, let alone endless winters in Greenland. But the reason they're not mining and drilling for oil is because it is very hard to do it. It is a very challenging environment. The terrain of the Arctic, and there's all kinds of environmental concerns and the infrastructure. It's just no one is doing it. So if we were to get Greenland, even if we bought Greenland, it'd be a complete waste of money. What are we going to do with it? Nobody else is doing anything with it right now because there's nothing economically viable. The biggest industry, I think, in Greenland is tourism. For some people want to go there and check it out, right? It's not mining. It's not oil and gas. And that's for a reason. There's plenty of private businesses that could go in to Greenland. No, only America would be dumb enough to try to do it, right? So the idea that we need the resources, this is BS, and we don't need to own it. I don't know where Trump came up with this idea that we need. I don't know. Maybe he used to play a lot of Risk as a kid, and he thinks that, he remembers Greenland was an important spot on the board. You wanted to have armies in Greenland so you could protect North American continent, right? If you captured that continent, it was good to prevent somebody from getting Europe by building a stronghold up in Greenland, right? I don't know what the hell he comes up with this nonsense, but he's talking about this, and he has pissed off the whole world. Now, a number of European countries, all the big countries in Europe, came out, rightly so, against Donald Trump's threats to forcibly annex Greenland, basically an act of war, right? Other NATO members, and Denmark is in NATO, so is Greenland. And America is saying, we're going to attack. We are going to declare war on another NATO alliance member, which in theory, if we do that, the rest of NATO is supposed to come to Greenland's defense and declare war on us, right? But so these other, prime ministers, heads of state, they come out and they say, no, this is wrong. Trump can't do that. So Trump is all pissed off that these guys are not saying, yeah, great idea. Go invade Greenland, right? Because they're not agreeing with him, like all the yes men in his cabinet. I was on this show in France, the other day, and somebody asked me, like, who's advising Trump, or what about Trump's economic advisors? And I said, I don't think he has any advisors. I think he just has yes men and yes women. He didn't bring anybody on board to give advice. He just wants people to, parrot his idea. Like, he's running the show. And every time he has some harebrained, cockamamie idea, and you ask somebody in his cabinet or some of these pundits on TV, well, he's just so smart. He's a super genius. He's playing 4D chess. He thinks a million moves ahead. So nobody can figure out exactly what he's doing because he's that brilliant, right? He's way ahead of everybody else. Like, no, maybe he's just that nuts. Maybe that's the reality, right? Don't overcomplicate it. When Trump says something stupid, it's not because he's playing 4D chess. He doesn't even know how to play checkers. That is the problem. But so these leaders come out and they say, we're against the U.S. invading Greenland. So Trump comes out of the blue on Truth Social and says, all these countries, because you are opposed to our invading Greenland by force, you're now going to be hit with another 10% tariff on top of the tariffs that you already have, starting February 1st. And if I don't own Greenland, right? If we don't have this resolved by, I forget, like 3 months later, those 10% tariffs are going to go up to 25% tariffs. And this is on top of the baseline tariffs they're already paying, whether it's 10%, 15%. So now he's escalating the trade war because other people, other countries oppose his military intervention into Greenland. And of course, also over the Greenland, he had more questions about, well, you know, what if the people in Greenland don't want to be part of the United States? He's like, well, that's their problem, right? We need it. We're going to take it. And that's that, right? And this is the attitude, right, that I think is causing the world to now second guess this entire relationship. You know, we're like Frankenstein's monster, right? Because Frankenstein, right, creates this monster. And then the monster, right, turns on its own creator, right? That's the risk when you create a monster, right? You may lose control of it. And now that's what the world is thinking about America. That, oh my God, you know, we have funded these huge deficits of the United States, the twin deficits, and we've allowed the U.S. to live beyond its means and afford to spend all this money on the military, to build up this big military. Because if it wasn't for us, America couldn't have this big military because it couldn't afford it. But because of all the money it's able to borrow from Europe, from Asia, from South America, America can have this big arsenal, this big military. Now, again, if the world thought, well, okay, at least America is this benevolent a country and it's a force for good. But Trump just made it clear, no, it's not about peace anymore. It's about doing what's in America's interest. And if America wants something, America takes it. Screw the rest of the world. If there's something we want, we just take it. What are you going to do about it? Nothing, right? Because we are the biggest, baddest, toughest guys on the block, right? And in fact, one of the things that Trump said is we've got to go in there and invade Greenland before Russia does, before China does, right? So in other words, because China might invade Greenland in the future, we're going to do it now, right? But they've said nothing about, they're not threatening Greenland, and neither is Russia. So because somebody might do something bad in the future, we're going to do something bad now preemptively? I mean, what kind of logic is that? You know, I was watching Scott Bassett, you know, another, you know, Trump ass kisser on, you know, Face the Nation, Meet the Press, I forget which one. And he was asked about these tariffs, which the Supreme Court still hasn't ruled on and which are obviously unconstitutional. But the host asked him, well, what's the emergency? Like, what's the nature of the emergency here? And he said, well, the emergency or the crisis is that we're trying to prevent a crisis, right? So if we don't do this now, there'll be a crisis in the future. So the crisis is the need to prevent a crisis from happening in the future. And the example that he gave of why it's important for the government to prevent a crisis was the subprime mortgage problem and the financial crisis. So he said, imagine, if you will, in this alternative universe, that there was somebody who raised his hand in 2005 or 2006 and said, hey, stop it with the subprime mortgages. This is not a good idea. Imagine if somebody actually did that. But he said nobody did. Nobody raised their hand. Nobody thought loaning money to, you know, marginal borrowers who probably couldn't repay it, you know, nobody thought that was a bad idea. It didn't dawn on anybody, right? But now Donald Trump is that guy. He's seeing a problem that nobody else sees, and he wants to stop it. Well, first of all, I beg to differ that nobody was warning about subprime in 2005 and 2006. In fact, my mortgage banker's speech was in 2006, and I gave a similar speech in 2005. So I was not only raising my hand, I was like Arnold Horshack in Welcome Back, Kotter. I was like, ooh, Mr. Kotter, Mr. Kotter. Now, some of you are probably too young to know about the Sweat Hogs and Welcome Back, Kotter. but that's where John Travolta got his start as Vinnie Barbarino. But there was a character, Arnold Horshack, and that's how he raised his hand. And in fact, I often think about that show because I live here in Puerto Rico and I'm Jewish. So I say I'm a Jewish Puerto Rican. That was Juan Epstein. He was another character and he was a Jewish Puerto Rican. So now I'm kind of like Juan Epstein. But I was like, Mr. Carter, right? Stop with the subprime. It wasn't like, and it wasn't just me. So it's ridiculous to say that the reason we had a financial crisis was because nobody could figure out that there was a problem in subprime. I mean, what about all the people that shorted it? I mean, did he not see the movie, right? The Big Short? I mean, it was there. But in fact, not only didn't the government ignore all the warnings that were there, the government, through the GSEs, Fannie and Freddie were the biggest buyers of subprime mortgages in 2005 and 2006. So not only didn't the government try to stop subprime, it was the main reason that it got so big. So he is full of it. The government is never going to get out of front of a crisis. No way. They will cause a crisis. The reason that the government did not want to stop the mortgage bubble and the housing bubble was because too many people were getting rich. The bankers were getting rich. Wall Street was getting rich. Main Street, they were getting rich too, right? Their houses were going up in value. Everybody was getting rich. Nobody wanted to rain on that parade, right? So he's full of it on so many different ways. But I just digressed really from the point that I wanted to make to say that we got to go into Greenland because, we have to avert this crisis, because if we don't go there, the Chinese are going to take it. The Russians are going to take it. That is complete BS. And if we want to prevent Russia and China from conquering Greenland, we don't have to own Greenland. I mean, for how long did we have troops? We still have troops in Germany. But remember, we had all these troops, on the border between West Berlin and East Berlin. I mean, basically, West Berlin was surrounded by East Berlin, right? It was a little island in the middle of this communist country, and we had our troops there, with Checkpoint Charlie. We didn't own any of West Germany or West Berlin, but we protected it. We had our troops there. We have our troops all over the place. We had all these troops in Japan. Did we make the Japanese concede some of their land to America? Hey, we're not going to defend Japan if we don't have an ownership stake. So there is no reason to do this. But what we did do, again, is alert the world to the dangers of subsidizing the United States. Right? And the Europeans are now waking up. Hey, Europe owns $8 trillion worth of U.S. treasuries. Oh, well, I just read today that it was a Danish pension fund. Oh, we're going to dump our treasuries. In fact, this is going to begin the mass exodus out of U.S. treasuries, out of all U.S. dollar-denominated debt. This is it. The dollar's days are over as the reserve currency. The reign is coming to an end. Again, I didn't think that Greenland, might be the straw that breaks the camel's back, but that's what it was. And it's over. And this process is not going to stop. Again, you can't put that genie back in the bottle, right? Gold was telling you that. Silver was telling you that early. And I was saying that gold and silver were first, right? Talking about the 2008 crisis, gold and silver were like subprime, the most sensitive to the dollar losing its status. Reacted first. First gold, then silver, other precious metals. Now it's moving into the bond market and the foreign exchange market. And you're going to start to see some big moves down. Now, the Trump administration, they're desperate, right? They got Fannie and Freddie buying a couple of $100 billion worth of mortgage-backed securities. This is kind of like pushing against the tide. It's not going to stop. Rates are going to rise. Long-term rates are going up. Mortgage rates are going up. This whole house of cards is going to come collapsing down. And I think what the world obviously is thinking is, if we just stop subsidizing the United States, then the United States is not the threat. because we won't be able to fund our military interventionists because we're going to be too busy dealing with an economic crisis at home. One of the reasons that Trump gets away with this stuff is his political capital. He has the support of Republicans in Congress. He has support of his base. He has support from the media, financial media. Well, when we have an economic crisis, a financial crisis, and the bond market crashes, the dollar crashes, interest rates soar, stocks tank, we're in a massive recession with lots of unemployment, there goes all of the president's support. People are going to run from him, right, like mice trying to get off a sinking ship. And Europe knows that. That's how we solve our problem, right? That's how we win a war with the United States. We can't beat them militarily, but we can beat them economically because President Trump and his team of, economic ignoramuses don't understand where the U.S.'s bread is buttered. They don't understand, the nature of this relationship. Trump thinks that we are in the driver's seat because we have all the consumers. We have the consumers because the world allows it. Anybody can consume. Any idiot can consume, and we've proved that because, we've got more than our share. But it's not the consumer that's important. It's the producer. The hard part is producing the goods. Once the goods are produced, anybody can consume them, but not anybody can produce them. You need the resources. You need the capital. You need, the infrastructure. You need a lot of things to produce. You don't need anything to consume. You just have to be there, right? We all, right? The definition of economics, a basic definition that my father taught me, was how do you satisfy unlimited human desires with limited resources? So wanting stuff, there's no limit to what we want, right? So demand is endless. It's supply that's the constraining factor. Now, maybe AI will change that in the future, but in the here and now, supply is what's important, not demand. Supply is what creates demand, right? And they create the supply outside the United States. And also, we're the big borrowers, right? But in order to borrow, somebody somewhere has to save. What's easier, to borrow money or to save it? Obviously, to borrow it, because saving money means you earned money and you did not spend it. It means that you denied yourself something, right? You didn't indulge your every whim. You had the restraint to earn some money and then the discipline not to spend it, to put it away, right? So the hard part is the saving. The easy part is to borrow what somebody else saved and just splurge, right? So what do Americans do? We consume what everybody else makes and we borrow what they save. They don't need us. They need us like a hole in the head, right? They got each other. They've got themselves, right? And that's what Americans are about to find out. That's what Trump and a lot of people in the Republican Party are about to find out, that they have overplayed. We have overplayed our hand, right? And the world is calling our bluff. And we made it so they had no choice, right? And I know that the world probably resisted doing the right thing because of the short-term, political instability or economic pain. Sure, when the dollar crashes and Americans can no longer afford to buy stuff, yes, there are going to be European companies, there are going to be Asian companies that are going to be hurt because their customers in America are going to be broke. And so if your customers are broke, yes, that is a inconvenience. That is a, problem for you because, these customers are no longer viable. So it is disruptive. Now you got to find new customers. But what they don't realize is the new customers are not going to be hard to find. They're going to be all over the place because when the dollar crashes, it doesn't crash in a vacuum. It crashes against currencies. And so the purchasing power that Americans lose, other people will gain. And so now goods that were unaffordable by some people will now be affordable, right? Things that Americans used to be able to afford will now be unaffordable, right? If you think we have an unaffordability crisis now, wait a few months, wait a couple of years. You ain't seen nothing yet. Things are going to become much more unaffordable for Americans, but they're going to become more affordable for a lot of other people. And so factories, right, businesses in Germany that were selling a lot of stuff to America, okay, they'll sell the same stuff, maybe a little bit different, to China, to India, someplace else. In fact, what's going on? China just struck a trade deal with Canada. Canada's dropping tariffs. China's getting closer with Canada. China's getting closer with Russia. They're getting closer with everybody, right? We're alienating the whole world. And the world is realizing that they're better off without us, especially now that we're no longer a military force for good. We're not, there to protect everybody. We're there to take what we want, right? Forget peace. If we want it, we take it. So we're now a threat. We're an economic threat. We're a military threat. How does the world neutralize that threat? By taking away our credit card, by hitting us where it really hurts, right? In the dollar, in the bank account, creating a crisis. And it could easily hit this year. And the big difference between the 2026 financial crisis, which is actually going to coincide with the 250th year anniversary of our country, right? But the 2026 financial crisis will be very different than the 2008 financial crisis. Not just because it's going to be a lot worse, but because it's not going to be a global financial crisis. It's going to be an American financial crisis. The rest of the world is actually going to benefit because the burden of supporting the U.S. consumer-based economy will be lifted from their backs. So our loss is the rest of the world's gain. That's what the world's going to find out. See, they've been reluctant to do this because they didn't want to upset the apple cart. Well, wait till they find out, right, how much more beneficial it is for them, right? People, the rest of the world doesn't understand the heavy burden that has been placed upon it by the United States. In exchange for our military protection, we have exacted a heavy toll. Yes, the world hasn't spent money on their military. They spent it on ours. Right? They've loaned it to us. They've provided us with the goods that we don't produce so that we can produce weapons instead. Right? So this whole arrangement is going to come to an end, and this is a U.S. economic crisis, a U.S. financial crisis that won't reverberate around the world. Yes, the world is going to take a loss on their treasuries, but their currencies are going to go up. You see, when we had the 2008 financial crisis, the dollar went way up. When the crisis started in the summer of 2008, the dollar index was at an all-time record low. It was around 70. Now it's just below 100. So the dollar is at a high point about to collapse. And as the dollar falls, that is going to be a big benefit for the rest of the world. And as money, after the 2008 financial crisis, money came fleeing to America, right? Everybody, came to America for safety. Now, everyone's going to be pulling their money out of America for safety because America is the epicenter of the problem. America is the danger spot. Treasuries are not a risk-free asset. They are the risk. The U.S. dollar is the risk. So the safe haven is gold. The safe haven is silver. The safe haven is not Bitcoin. And that should be painfully obvious. All these Bitcoiners are now they're just waiting, right? They're all waiting for Bitcoin to follow gold and silver. They think it's only a matter of time. The fact that it hasn't moved means it's not going to move. Bitcoin had its time to shine and it passed, right? It had a test and it failed. It is over for Bitcoin. I mean, is it possible that it could have another run? I say it's unlikely, highly unlikely, because it already would have. And the markets don't make it that easy, right? You have plenty of time to load up on Bitcoin if it's going to make a big move up. I think the markets don't give you that much time to do something that looks that obvious. The reason you have so much time to buy Bitcoin is because it's the wrong thing to do. All the people that have moved into Bitcoin because they expect it to follow gold and silver are going to be in for a world of hurt as the market implodes. But this crisis, this 2008 U.S. financial crisis, dollar sovereign debt crisis, and maybe we can hold off until 2027. I don't know. But this is January, right? It's already started. Gold is already up 10% on the year. We're not even finished with January. Silver is up 30%. 30%. Gold and silver are off to a stronger start this year than last year. And gold mining stocks are off to a much stronger start into 2026 than they were in 2025. So we've got a long way to go this year. We got the midterms. But again, the worst thing politically is the Republican Party owns this crisis. Whether they deserve to own the whole thing or not, and they don't because the Democrats share a lot of the blame, it's all going to go laid at the feet of the Republicans. And the Democrats are probably going to sweep the House and the Senate in the midterms. It could be the biggest loss for an incumbent party in history. And then we're probably going to get a fledged Democratic socialist for president. Now, right now we have a Republican socialist, and the problem is the Republican socialist claims that he believes in capitalism, which he doesn't, but the Democratic socialist will be able to use the problems that were created in part by the Republican socialists and say that capitalism doesn't work, and this is why we need socialism to solve the problem, even though socialism will be the source of the problem, and the Democrats will take it to an even higher level. And so they're going to rub salt in an already very deep wound. So the problem is, or what the solution is now for the listeners to my podcast is to do something about it now. To, don't lose the race to get out of the dollar. Get out now. Get out ahead of most people, because most people are like a deer in a headlight. But you got to sell U.S. stocks. You got to sell U.S. bonds. You got to sell U.S. dollars. You got to be into foreign stocks. You got to be into value. You got to be into dividends. You got to be into resources. You got to be into the emerging markets. You pretty much have to own the portfolios that I have been creating for people for years, because I knew this was coming. I knew it was coming long time ago. And again, we ended up delaying the day of reckoning. We kicked the can down the road, but I knew that eventually our luck would run out. Our ability to do that would run out. And Donald Trump just accelerated the process. That should have happened, right? Anyway, now it's begun, finally. And so the returns are going to be phenomenal, right? The returns on gold stocks already beat the S&P for the past 10 years. I mean, gold obviously kills it, gold and silver. But foreign stocks way outperformed the U.S. market last year. They're already way outperforming it this year. And the year just began. So you got to get into these portfolios. What is about to happen is exactly what I've designed my strategy to protect you from and to enable you to profit. Right? Most people are going to get wiped out. Right? We don't have to share in that fate. Unfortunately, I wish there was something I could do to help avert it, but I can't, right? I try to go on Fox News and tell the truth, and the president gets me kicked off, right? You're not allowed to criticize Trump on Fox News, right? So much for freedom of the press. But look, there's nothing I can do about this disaster, right? But I can save as many people as I can, right? We don't all have to go broke just because the country is going to go broke, right? A few Americans could manage to survive it financially, and they will if they follow my plan. I've got this economic survival plan that will not only protect your wealth, but allow you to increase your wealth as the dollar collapses and other assets rise in value. What's lost in America will be gained outside America, but you don't have to live outside America. You can own the assets that are gaining the value that U.S. assets are losing, right? That's what we're doing. So make sure and go to the Europac website, europac.com. Look at my 5 mutual funds. You can buy them all, no load, any discount broker. But better yet, just call up the phone number, schedule an appointment, talk to the representatives, and transfer your retirement account over, your IRA over. Let us help you manage that. Let us help you build and manage your portfolio so that you can survive and thrive during very, very trying economic times that are going to be following the United States. And the timeline, I think, now is short, right? I mean, everything is kind of happening, and I think the pace is going to quicken. Remember the old saying, how did you go How did you go broke? Well, slowly at first, then all at once. Well, I think we've gone through the slowly part. We're now at the all at once part. So you have to act quickly. You got to buy your physical gold and silver. If you don't already have gold and silver, shame on you, but buy it now. I know I've been saying it, but, you could also buy more, right? I mean, you never have enough, right? So go to Schiff Gold. And again, everybody who follows me should open up a T-Gold account because we're going to need T-Gold one day. I mean, we're going to need an alternative monetary system because the dollar is going to collapse. People aren't going to want to deal in dollars. They're going to want to deal in alternative. And the best money is gold. And what makes gold even better is the internet. Tokenization is the ability to transact in gold without actually having to physically carry it around. That way you can transact in very small increments. Because remember, gold is going to be very expensive, right? Now it's almost 5,000 an ounce, 47.60. It'll be 10,000 an ounce. It'll be 20,000 an ounce, which means if gold's at $20,000, even a 10th ounce gold coin is $2,000, right? That's a lot of purchasing power in a 10th ounce coin, right? So the best way to spend it will be if you can have a token and have a third party that you trust store your gold so that you can transact in your gold without actually having to hold it. Now, you don't want to have all your gold with a third party, but the gold that you want to use in commerce as a medium of exchange, yes, makes it so much simpler, right? And so go and set up a T-Gold account. Also, make sure and subscribe to my free newsletter at Schiff Sovereign. You've got to stay informed, not just listening to my podcasts on a regular basis, listening to the Schiff Gold Friday market wraps, but you got to read these newsletters. There's a lot of information that I don't have time to cover in the podcast, and we go over it in more in depth in these newsletters. You got to stay on top of the situation. There's so much misinformation and fake news that's being spread all over the country. I'm not the only source of the truth, but I'm one of them, right? There's not that many. And that's why you've got to help spread the word, not just so we can educate more people, but you got to get your friends and your relatives to invest in my strategies, to own my mutual funds, to have our separately managed accounts, to own gold and silver. You don't want to be your only friend who's not broke. You don't want to have to pick up every check, right? Because all your friends went broke in U.S. dollars in the U.S. stock market, right? It's not fun when all your friends are broke and you're the only one that has money. And now everybody has to hit you up for money because they know you've got it. Hey, I know, they know you have gold, they know you have silver, and they're hurting, and so they want a loan or they want some money. So make sure that the people that you care about in your life, right, whether it's your kids, your parents, your siblings, make sure they are invested in these strategies too, right? So everybody in your inner circle can survive and thrive. So you're not the only one, right? So you have company. So you want to do stuff. Other people aren't too broke to do it with you, right? You can split the cost. You don't have to pay for everything. And of course, a lot of people might say, hey, why didn't you tell me about this? So you kind of have a duty to let everybody know what's going to happen. Let everybody know about what I'm doing or what I'm saying. Let your friends and your relatives know. And if they don't take my advice, they got nobody but themselves to blame. They can't come back at you and say, why didn't you tell me about this stuff? I mean, you protected yourself. What about me? You didn't give a shit about me, right? You just kept all this knowledge to yourself. No, don't keep it to yourself. Spread it, right? Scream it from the rooftops. Tell as many people. Do your part. That's what I'm doing. Nobody is going to be able to say, Peter, why didn't you warn me? Why didn't you tell me this was going to happen, right? I'm going out of my way to warn everybody. I'm going to these crypto conferences to try to bang some sense into these knuckleheads, who a lot of them are pretty good people, and I'm trying to save them. And when they go down with this ship and they lose all their money, they can't say, Peter, you should have said something, right? Nobody can blame me because I'm doing everything I can to get people to do the right thing. And I need you guys to help me. Bye for now.